If you're hosting or helping with Thanksgiving dinner this year, you need to watch this whole video. Unquestionably, Thanksgiving dinner is probably the biggest event of anyone's entire year when it comes to American cooking. So here are the top 26 mistakes I see every Thanksgiving, whether I'm a guest or I'm hosting, and how to avoid them. Let's get going. The first mistake I see over and over again is baking your pies the day of Thanksgiving. You should never be baking pies on Thanksgiving unless you start at like 6 in the morning and you're not eating until like 6 o'clock at night. Thanksgiving pies, or any pies in general, need to set. That is the number one mistake I see people making with pies and baking in general. Fruit pies especially, custard pies, they all need time to bake, and then they need to be at a complete room temperature or even chilled in order to set. Otherwise, that filling is going to spill everywhere. Please do not make your pies the day of Thanksgiving. Also, make sure that you read through every single recipe so you don't forget a step. For example, a recipe might seem pretty straightforward, but you might have missed the spot where it says you need to chill an element for 6 hours or overnight, and you're left with not that much time. So make sure that you read through every single recipe that you're going to make, look through the ingredient list, and make sure you're prepared. The next mistake I see time and time again is not making a shopping list. If you go to the store just thinking, oh, I need to pick up a couple things for Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm pretty sure I'll remember, I promise you're gonna forget something. So make sure you do an inventory of your fridge, freezer, and pantry for everything that you need. If you think that you normally have, flour, sugar, brown sugar, those types of things, and you think, oh, I have plenty of butter in the freezer, but then the day of Thanksgiving, you're trying to make something that requires a lot of butter or flour, and you realize that you are almost out, that is a really bad feeling to have. So make sure that you do a physical shopping list. You go to your pantry and you write down, like you have to see it with your eyes to make sure that you have it before you cross it off your list. This next mistake is kind of a general cooking mistake I see a lot, but just winging it. Make sure that you print off every single recipe that you're going to make, line them all up so you know you have everything, cross off every ingredient on the list to make sure that you have it, and have a plan. These next two are a little bit of a housekeeping rule for any party or gathering you're going to have at home, but make sure that you start the day with an empty dishwasher. Nothing is worse than when you're done with a huge meal and your dishwasher is already full and you can't put any new dishes in there. So make sure you start the morning off right with a clean, empty dishwasher that's ready for all the day's dishes. And the next one, which is pretty similar, is make sure you empty out the trash before you start a full day of cooking and eating. This next mistake is kind of stereotypical, and you see it depicted in a lot of movies and just like satire, but it's a real thing because I've seen it before, especially people who are not experienced cooking Thanksgiving dinner or have never cooked a full turkey before. You cannot thaw your turkey the day of. Those things are like bowling balls, and they take days or even like a week to thaw completely. Do not buy a turkey the day before Thanksgiving and expect to eat it the next day, because it will not thaw. It will still be just as frozen the next day in the fridge as it was yesterday. Next is not planning on leftovers. You will definitely have leftovers of Thanksgiving dinner, and if you don't want to eat and keep all the leftovers for yourself, make sure you prepare some kind of containers, buy some extra little to-go containers for your guests, or ask them to bring some, so then you can send off your leftovers and you don't have tons and tons of Thanksgiving leftovers in your fridge. This next mistake is something I see at every single Thanksgiving dinner I've been to. It's dry food. Nothing is worse than having like one element on your beautiful Thanksgiving plate that's just like not very good. So I found this tip several years ago, like 15 years ago. I was watching a Thanksgiving special on Food Network, and one of the chefs recommended that you just keep a pot or a jar of chicken broth or turkey broth on your stovetop, in the fridge, just ready to go, because a lot of dry food can be remedied by having chicken or turkey broth. If your gravy is too thick, if your gravy's just like there's not enough gravy, just add some chicken broth to it. If your stuffing is super dry, just add some chicken broth to it. You can fix a lot of things. Even if your turkey is dry, all you need to do is put some melted butter and some chicken broth over it. Just kind of let it soak and warm up, and that will help kind of rehydrate dry turkey. Definitely don't want dry food. This next mistake is easy to make because you see all these turkeys in the frozen section of your store and you think, you know what, we're having a lot of people. We don't want anyone to be without turkey. We'll just grab the biggest one we can find and it's going to look amazing and huge and so grand. But instead of doing one giant bird, I suggest buying several smaller turkeys. This is because the meat is going to be way more tender and there's a smaller chance that it's going to dry out while cooking. Think about it, if you have a giant turkey, and especially if you make some of these other mistakes I'm going to talk about in the video, if you're cooking a huge turkey, it's going to take a long time for the internal temperature of that turkey to be at a safe eating temperature. And by the time the inside's done, the outside's going to be so dry and overcooked. No one wants that. So make sure you buy a couple smaller birds, and that will prevent a lot of heartache later. Number 11 is cooking a cold turkey. As is the case with cooking just about any cut of meat, you need to make sure that your bird, especially something so large, is at room temperature before you start cooking it. The reason is because if you have a really cold piece of meat going straight into the oven or a roaster, that bird is not going to cook very evenly. You're going to have an overcooked exterior and an undercooked interior. It's going to be dried out and it's not going to be as good as it could be. So make sure that you're thawing your turkey for the appropriate amount of days before you actually get to Thanksgiving Day, and then take it out of the fridge and let it come to close to room temperature before you start cooking it. This may be the most important and most looked over mistake that I see in cooking, and definitely around Thanksgiving and holiday cooking, is not using a cooking thermometer. Please don't rely on that little plastic pop-up that comes in your turkey. Who knows if those are accurate? You need to have a good, reliable cooking thermometer. You know, I always use my Thermapen one. This thing is amazing. I could not cook without it. If I could choose one thing in my kitchen to, if I could only have one thing in my kitchen to keep, it would be this, because with this, everything's always gonna be okay and safe to eat. If you are doing a turkey in the oven or a roaster, I definitely recommend this one. It's a chef alarm. It's made by the same company. This one has a probe, so you actually keep this connected and you keep it in your turkey the entire time, and then you can see the temperature as it's going up. You can have it set off an alarm when it gets to a specific temperature. It's very good, so then you don't have to keep opening the oven to check the temperature, opening your roaster, because then that lets air and heat out of the oven, so it lowers the overall temperature of the oven, and then it's just like an up and down cooking mess in the oven. So I recommend a probe thermometer for longer cooks. The next mistake is not delegating. There are a million tasks to do on Thanksgiving Day, and honestly, even if you're a control freak, you don't have to do them all. I promise there are small tasks that really don't make a huge difference that anyone can do. Things like, putting olives or relishes on the table in bowls. Those don't need to be perfect. You can have someone help set the table, or cut up veggies for a veggie tray. If you're a perfectionist, I'm not, I really don't care. But if you are and you have a hard time delegating, just make a list, a pre-prepared list of some small tasks that don't mean a lot to you that you can give away to other people, because everyone wants to help and you should let them. In addition to small tasks, make sure that you delegate out small things. If people want to help, they let them. So small things that you really don't need too much control over are like festive plates, festive napkins, butter for the tables, olives, relishes, jams. You can ask your guests to bring whipped cream or ice cream, little things like that that you don't necessarily have to do because they're pretty standard and easy for other guests to help with. If you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you are going to be in the kitchen all day, make sure that you wear comfortable house shoes and you buy some mats for your kitchen. Otherwise, your feet and your back are going to be trashed all day and the next week after. This next one breaks my heart. It's under baking your pies. Pies are honestly super time consuming and they take a lot of effort because there's lots of steps that really need to be done perfectly in order to have a really spectacular pie. So the biggest mistake I see is people who underbake their pies. And here's a trick I actually learned on MasterChef is make sure you're baking your pies in a glass clear dish, and then when you take it out of the oven, when you're checking on it, look on the bottom. So I always peer under the bottom. This goes for bread, most baked goods, but if you can see it sticking to the bottom of the pot or the pan, if you can see the pie dough is kind of wet or there's a little circle on the bottom right here, you know that that is underbaked. This middle part needs to be the same color and it needs to look exactly the same as this outer part, and then you'll know that it's fully cooked and it's not gonna stick when you try and take your pie out of the pie tin. In the same breath, I see a lot of over-baked pies, and so to remedy this, make sure that you are doing some kind of a pie crust shield when you're baking your pie crust. You can either make it out of some foil, just make like a long strip of foil and kind of cover the outside of your pie crust, or what you can do is buy a silicone pie shield. I have one, but I looked for it, I don't know where it is. But it's just like a little ring that goes around the crust of your pie, and it prevents burning and over baking. Spectacular. Make sure you do this because you don't want to ruin the best part of the pie. The next one is over mashing your potatoes. This one makes me so sad because mashed potatoes are like one of the most important elements on your Thanksgiving plate. So when you over mash potatoes, they become really gluey because the starches in the potatoes, they overactivate, and then it just literally is like a giant glop, and it's not appetizing and it's not delicious. So I'm a big fan of hand mashing my potatoes using a potato masher like this instead of whipping them with like a hand mixer or a stand mixer. Those definitely work, and I've definitely used them before, but you have more control using something like this versus whipping them too much using a hand mixer. If you're nervous about it, you can also buy a potato ricer, which is like the #1 choice for sure, but not a lot of people have potato ricers. It's not like a super common household tool, I would say. But potato ricers, you just put a potato straight in the little ricer. It's kind of like a garlic press for potatoes. You put your boiled potato in there, and then you just like press it through, and you get these beautiful little flecks of potato, and then you don't have to mash them. You just like mix it in with the butter and the milk or the cream. Then you get like really smooth, beautiful potatoes. The next mistake I see is making everything on the stovetop and not using your Instant Pot. Now, I know I'm biased because I freaking love my Instant Pot, but honestly, this guy is amazing. You're not taking up stove space, you're not taking up oven space, and it's amazing to use. There are so many dishes that you can make in the Instant Pot that are way faster, just as high of quality, and way just like less of a mess, less babysitting in your Instant Pot versus making them in a traditional cooking method. So make sure you watch this video right here. It's 4 Instant Pot side dishes that I make for Thanksgiving, Christmas, the holidays that I only use my Instant Pot for. I will never go back to making them in the oven or on the stovetop. The next mistake is not using your pan drippings to make gravy. Please don't buy pre-made gravy or those little gravy packets if you are going through the trouble of roasting a turkey or, you know, any kind of meat. Those pan juices are amazing for gravy. That's like the point of using those. So all you need to do to make gravy using those pan drippings is to kind of lift them up off the bottom of your pot with a little bit of chicken broth, or you can even use cooking wine. And then you want to make a roux with butter and flour or some cornstarch and just thicken that up. It's so good because it's like using the chicken or the turkey's juices to make the gravy, and everything just like melts perfectly. So definitely use your pan drippings. Okay, please, please, please do this one. This mistake I see all the time. It's not resting your turkey. Turkey needs a minimum of at least 15 minutes to rest after it is done cooking. Otherwise, if you cut into a huge hot turkey straight out of the oven, the juices are gonna go everywhere, it's gonna dry out, and it's not going to be as good as you hoped it would be. If you're going through all the trouble of roasting a turkey, make sure that you follow the right steps, let it rest, let it relax, and it will be delicious. This is like kind of a mistake-ish, but it's trying a brand new recipe the day of Thanksgiving. If it's a dish or a type of protein or something you've literally never worked with before, I would advise you to test out the recipe first, or make sure that you know exactly how the elements work before you attempt to do it on Thanksgiving Day. Nothing is worse when you are trying to go to a beautiful meal or make a beautiful meal for your family and the recipe doesn't work. So make sure you test out new recipes, make sure you like how they taste, you know how they're going to turn out, how long it's going to cook for, how much resting time it needs. Don't try and do a new recipe the day of Thanksgiving. This mistake is a little bit funny, but it's going to the grocery store the night before Thanksgiving Day. One, it is going to be a madhouse. house, because everyone who had Thanksgiving assignments for Thanksgiving dinner, maybe they're not making the whole meal, but the ones who had assignments to go pick up soda, go pick up cups, bring whipped cream, bring a pie, all these people are mad dashing to the store to fulfill their assignments because they just didn't think about it before, and like nothing is going to be on the shelf. There's going to be a million people and it's going to be chaos. So do not go to the store the day before Thanksgiving. Take your shopping list like the week or two before. I usually do like 2 or 3 shopping trips, so like a month before Thanksgiving I'll have a list of all the things that are non-perishable that I can purchase way beforehand to make sure that they're in stock, and then about a week before Thanksgiving I'll get things that can last in the fridge for about a week, and then a couple days before Thanksgiving, if needed, I'll pick up any last minute items that are a little bit more time sensitive. But this all just goes back to make a plan, make sure that you are prepared for Thanksgiving. If you are trying to go to the store the night before Thanksgiving or the morning of Thanksgiving, which is even worse, do not be surprised if you cannot find whipped cream, butter, lettuce, all these little things that you don't think are a big deal, but it's very unlikely you're going to find them on Thanksgiving morning. This one's similar to the pies, but it's over baking or under baking rolls. So to prevent this, one, make sure that you are cooking with temperature. So take the temp of your breads, rolls in the center. You want them to be at least 190 degrees in order to make sure that they are not doughy in the middle. And then here's another one, is to make sure that they are completely cool, or at least have time to rest after baking. Bread is especially susceptible to this mistake because if you slice into a piping hot loaf of bread straight out of the oven, I promise it's just going to be kind of doughy or gluey feeling inside, even though it's cooked all the way. Bread and rolls, just like the pies, if you make them in like a dish like this, if you look on the bottom and you see any wet spots, that means that they are not cooked all the way. So make sure you look on the bottom of your pie plates or whatever baking dish that you're using, and take the temperature, and then also make sure that they are rested completely and cooled in order for them to have a fluffy, beautiful texture. Here's another, not like mistake, but kind of something I see, is stuffing the turkey. So one, I hope by this point people know you're not supposed to actually put your bread stuffing in the cavity of the bird. For the reason I stated earlier on buying smaller birds versus larger ones, by the time the internal temperature of that stuffing in the center of the bird gets to a consumable safe temperature, the rest of the bird has overcooked and it's going to be dry and it's not going to be good. Like, I don't think anyone likes stuffing that's inside the bird. It's going to be soggy, it's not going to be crispy at all. So make sure that you're not stuffing your turkey. If you do want to stuff a turkey, a lot of people will do like lemons, apples, onions. Those things are fine, but just so you know, they kind of just like perfume the air a little bit. They don't add a whole lot in terms of flavor. They don't do a whole lot in terms of texture. So it's not really a super necessary step. Instead, I would focus more on the outside, the skin of the bird. Make sure that skin is really dry when you put it in the oven so it gets a nice crisp on it. Make sure you're putting butter, a seasoned butter underneath that skin so it's kind of leaching into that beautiful breast meat and it's really tender and juicy. Those are more important than stuffing the bird. Maybe this is just a me issue, but I like my food to be piping hot pretty much all the time. And so this mistake is letting your food get cold and dry. To prevent this, make sure that you plan ahead and think of what foods can go in what warming vessels while you're waiting for the rest of your family and friends to arrive or the rest of the food to be done cooking. So use your crock pots or slow cookers, and think of any other ways that you can keep food nice and warm so that everything turns out beautifully. After all that effort, you want to make sure it tastes good. This last mistake is one I see a lot from party hosts and just event hosts in general, is not taking pictures. If you've gone through the trouble and the expense and the stress of hosting Thanksgiving dinner, make sure that you take photos of, the beautiful meal that you created, but also make sure that you get in the photos. If you don't want to take selfies yourself, ask someone else to take a picture of you, in the kitchen cooking. Take some pictures of the final dish or your family at the table. It's really important to have those memories, so make sure you get in the picture. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that I could have said, but those are my top 26 Thanksgiving dinner mistakes. I hope they help, and I hope that you have a drama-free, amazing Thanksgiving dinner. I am so grateful that you're here, so grateful for your continued viewership, for coming back, for recommending my channel to others. I just want to let you know I'm thankful for you. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.